the thing that they taught me, and this was later in my life, not that late, but still, like, in the middle of my career, was culture matters. People matter. Working together. Don't hire assholes. Hire people you want to be with. And Cass was just a superhero when it came to culture and what she brought
Yeah.
from giving back by doing community service, by getting out there, and we had our annual events, multiple annual events. But the thing it taught me, looking back, because we still have reunions. We just had one about 2 months ago. At a fundraiser, nonetheless. But you see how these younger kids grew up. They were single, now they're married, they have families, they're thriving in their careers, they're doing good. And the one thing that I thoroughly believe in is that, for me personally, it's generational.
Sometimes I feel like I want to fly without no wings. I elevate inside my mind.
Today you're going to meet a good friend of mine named David Honig, and just an incredible human being, incredibly well accomplished, just had a ton of great things to say. He is a tech veteran with, I think, 20 plus years of experience. We worked together when he was on the leadership team at Dynamic Signal. He was, previous to that, a director at Salesforce, I think a senior director. He was part of a company called Buddy Media, which provided social enterprise software. He was actually on the executive team there. And then prior to that, he co-founded a company called Media 6 Degrees, which is, I think today, a distillery, where they basically built technology for major brand marketers, for targeted audience. He was also at DoubleClick. He'll talk a little bit about that. And he lives in New Jersey with his wife and two twin daughters, and very active, in the community. He's just an incredible friend, human being, and I think you're going to love him. One of the things that we got into today was actually talking about how mental health and struggles with mental health in the workplace, in business, how he has over the years dealt with that in terms of helping others. He looks at relationships from kind of a human being first approach and a business approach second. I think that's one of his superpowers. When we worked together, he always would take the time to ask me how I was doing. That was kind of the first question that would always come out of his mouth, and I think that is just an incredible quality in him. He's humble, he's honest, he's transparent, and I think you're going to glean a lot of great insights in terms of how he has helped others over the years. And I'm just incredibly grateful that I was able to have him today. So I hope that you enjoy today's episode with Mr. David Honig, and let's get going. Mr. David Honig.
Matt Barkoff, how are you?
I'm good, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you.
It's always good to see you, man. Like, it's like, I feel like, like those types of relationships where you don't see somebody or talk to somebody for like years on years, even though we talk more often than that, obviously every month or two. But when you do actually finally connect, it just feels like you talked yesterday.
That's right. Well, it's good to see you in the black background behind you.
Oh, well, thank you. And you look beautiful as ever. So thanks for taking the time to join the Sober Cold Bear podcast. Super excited to have you here. Obviously, this is episode 5. And I'm really happy to have you here. Obviously, you and I are good friends, and you have a really, really terrific story. Just to let everybody know, this is not necessarily about sobriety. This program is about a lot of different topics, mainly around business, entrepreneurship,
But really, as this serves as a resource and as a resource for guidance and help. And the reason why I asked Mr. Honig to join is because he's an incredible human being first and foremost. He's an incredible father, husband. He's also had just a massively successful career. He and I worked together for many years. He saw me in the dips and the depths of my addiction, which we will talk about. But he also just has an incredible story. So before we get going to kind of talking about stuff, Mr. Honig, take it away and please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Dave. As you know, I've been doing this tech thing for a long time. I think around 25, 27 years. Started in '98 at a small company called DoubleClick, the first of its kind in regards to online media and technology. We then became, years later, Google. I left and I got into a number of industries after that. I was curious about search, got into the search field. In 2007, I got into the social media industry. Before people understood what social media was, I saw a real opportunity there. Built out a company called Buddy Media in 2009. Acquired by Salesforce years later. Spent a couple of years at Salesforce. Had a great time there. Met up with some old friends who were starting a company called Dynamic Signal Communications Platform, where I had the privilege to meet you. We built that, and we exited in 2022. And then I did since then I've been working in AI and machine learning, and really understanding what the next big thing is in this very messy AI world that we're living in right now, but exciting.
And yeah, and obviously we have probably 6 years of working together, and we had a ton of fun doing what we were doing, building. I mean, when we joined, right, we were basically had no revenue, and when I left to go to Salesforce, I think we were like 50-60 million in revenue. Like, we had a really fun time building something. It's so much fun to build things, especially with people that you love working with.
That's right.
And tell us a little bit about kind of some of the other areas besides technology that are joys in your life.
Let me see. I have twin girls. They're going to college next year.
I'm terrified about that, by the way. I have
Terri-
one there.
terrified. Terrified having teenage girls that are going to be 18. It's not the easiest all the time, but I make fun of it and I make light of it all the time. And as I always say, I don't sweat the small shit. But
No, that's true. You're very good at that.
I've been married now for going on almost 20 years. This September. My hobbies, are really being with friends. Catching up with people. I play a lot of pickleball 4 times a week. Having fun with that, and also meeting with founders every week. I'm meeting with 5 or 6 founders, really understanding their business models and some of their challenges, and talking about some of not so much my success, because I define success a lot differently than other people might. But some of the pitfalls and things to look out for, with these younger founders.
What do you define as success? I'm curious, and then I have a little question on fear. But let's start with that.
Success to me, it's funny. I'm in my 50s now, and as you evolve in your journey, success changes. Obviously, when you get out of school or college, you think success is all about money. And title, and it's really not the case. And one of the things I tell people all the time is stop worrying about your title. Stop worrying about that. Worry about being the best that you could be, right? And being curious and asking questions.
Curious,
and
that's a very
and
good one.
everything is gonna fall into place, with your success. But getting back to that. success to me is truly being a good, decent person, being a good brother, being a good father, being a good husband,
Yep.
being a good friend, a good coworker, a good boss, um, just a real good team player and a good person. And let's not make any mistakes here. I'm not going to lie here. Like there's times when you feel like you're not good or you're not doing well, whether it's in your personal or professional life. But that's where I understand how I always have to be better. And the listening part and the curious part really allows me to get good feedback to see where I need to be better. And my success over the years means nothing to me today. It's what I'm going to be doing in the future. It means everything to
Mm.
me. And that's being curious and really understanding the people you're working with, the people that you're around, that you surround yourself with at all times, and being very firm on what your beliefs are, but also understanding the other side of if there's disagreement and listening.
One of the greatest, I think, attributes of who you are is that you just have just an incredible energy when you connect with others. Like I've seen you over the years when you walk into a room, just the light that you bring to it. It's a lot of times you can tell how a person's feeling just by looking at their eyes or their face. Um, it it has been something for me personally to always see you. It doesn't matter what's going on in your head. You always show up as the best version of yourself, and I think that's why it's so infectious to be around you.
You know,
And I think that has transformed that has helped transform me in terms of what I see and how you've been a real guide to me over the years in terms of how I want to show up. I've obviously been very blessed to have a number of folks just like you that I've worked with. Um, but it's just a unique quality. I wanted to
thank
I
you.
wanted to
That's
share that
that's
with you.
that's important to me.
So you've worked obviously with a lot of founders, right? And you've been in boardrooms, and you've obviously had a huge successful career doing really big transactions and everything else. What do you find are the most positive traits of founders that you've experienced, and the other side to that, what are some of the negative traits that you've been able to learn from and gain experience from over the years?
You know, if you asked me that question 15 years ago, it would probably be much different than today. But
Of course.
some of the some of the things I look at in founders is one, having a successful track record and having experience. The other really important thing, maybe most important, is that founder a family person? It sounds funny, but some of the best founders I've worked with had families, and they were great entrepreneurs. They really balanced everything incredibly well. But they were also founders that really listened well to what you had to say and what you people had to say. And they weren't so much dictators. Not that people that aren't have families aren't dictators, but they had experience in regards to how to handle things. And over the last, since I want to say since 2008, I've been fortunate to be working with some of the greatest founders. In fact, at Buddy Media, we had a husband wife founder in
Mike and
Cass and
Kaz.
Mike Lazaro
Yeah.
that were some of the greatest human beings I've ever met in my life. And really,
By the way, one of the best videos I think I know of and that I like to gleam back on is when Mike announces the acquisition of Buddy to Salesforce. And he does it with all those cue cards, and it just shows about like who he is as a human being. That always for me was something that I have enjoyed watching over the years. And you got to work with them front row seat, not to mention others.
yeah, it's funny when I look back at that time and wildly successful. It wasn't an easy road, obviously.
Never
But
is.
one of the things I look back on, I'm one of the older people in an organization, this startup that has a lot of young talents out of college, 20 something year olds. And the thing that they taught me, and this was later in my life, not that late, but still, like, in the middle of my career, was culture matters. People matter. Working together. Don't hire douchebags. Don't hire assholes. You know, hire people you want to be with. And Cass was just a superhero when it came to culture and what she brought,
Yeah.
from giving back by doing community service, by getting out there, and we had our annual events, multiple annual events. But the thing it taught me, looking back, because we still have reunions. We just had one about 2 months ago,
Yeah.
at a fundraiser, nonetheless. But you see how these younger, younger kids grew up. They were single. Now they're married. They have families. They're thriving in their careers. They're they're doing good. And the one thing that I thoroughly believe in is that, for me personally, it's generational. And what do I mean by that? You know, Before Buddy Media, I wasn't so much thinking about giving back and being better, in regards to, being better outside work.
Yeah.
And it's really, as this is, I have to shut that down. It really taught me, how
Focused.
to how
Focused,
to
Dave.
give how to give back, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, service is a huge
but
piece
but
of
the
this.
thing is, I bring it to my children, right? And
Yeah.
and when we started Buddy Media, my kids were a year old, 2 years old. They didn't
Yeah.
know, but now, the stories I could tell about my children and what they're doing to giving back with their nonprofits. I really hold and I test a lot of the things that I learned in my career on what it is to be a good human, and giving more than you're taking.
100% well said. I actually want to try and get Mike and Kaz on a future episode. I think that would be a really fun conversation to have with like the two of them, both as founders, and then the things they've been doing over the years. One of the things I really love about them is, they continue to be, out there and vocal about kind of the real, the important things in life. Obviously, the book that they just wrote is I'm looking forward to reading, and everything else. So yeah, I mean, you've been
This
very,
book, this
yeah,
book.
shoveling shit. There you go. Story of life. Um, uh, Before we kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about kind of how you have, over the years, helped others, and folks, especially folks that you're like managing, things like that. How do one of the things that I've learned in my sobriety program is just around, just like today is today is today, and tomorrow I don't know what's going to happen. But if I kind of live today in the moment, it's going to make it's going to, I'm going to bring the best version of myself to everything that I do. And so, and fear is a really big thing for me in life, and being able to identify those fears and sit with them. And that's not necessarily a fun thing. How do you handle fear? Like, for instance, your daughters are going to be going off to college. You're going to be empty nesters, and like, how are you trying to? How do you manage that? And how are you preparing yourself, knowing that they're here right now, and knowing that very soon it's going to be a quiet household?
The quick answer is, I don't prepare for it. I don't. I fear it, but what I don't have control, I can't control. And again, it gets back to my, and it's really not so much don't sweat the small shit here, but it's about, this is life, this is the journey, right? And I don't know what that part of my life is going to bring. It's going to bring another type of joy that I don't have today, right? It's just a part of the journey, as with your son, going to college, right? And you being with him as he was 3, 4, 5 years old at baseball practices, and watching him grow as a fantastic baseball player, and you becoming the proud dad, but you always trying to coach him, or you trying to always to be a part of that. And I saw it every day in you, right? And how proud you were. And now he's pitching for, Big Ten Oregon, right? And it changes. So I don't know if I fear much. I just go with the flow, and
Yeah.
see what the cards, what the cards bring to me, as long as I'm, aware of things. Now, I want to make sure that, my kids are always, are healthy. They're making the right decisions. They're not doing stupid stuff that I might have did in high school. I might be more stricter than my parents might have been with me, since I was the fourth child. And at that point, they were just like, okay, have fun.
Sure.
But, I only hope that my wife and I, did everything where, they could just excel, and fly.
And you always gave them the opportunity and put them into, because over the years, right, I've been seeing what you've been doing with them, and obviously you are incredibly fortunate where you have the means to be able to provide them with a wonderful life, but you've also incorporated into their lives, culture and, things that actually guide them and make them, human beings, while also kind of remaining humble at the same time. And, for me, I mean, you've seen me in probably some of the lowest levels of my addiction, and you probably didn't even know that well, maybe you did, but like my how I was when we worked together for a good portion of that time, like I was deep in the thralls of addiction, and how I showed up in terms of like my reaction, and how I like I was always I've always been a high performer in my career, but in terms of my behavior always got me into hot water.
Yeah,
And
it did. But, it was funny. The question I always had is, when I was out west, what Matt Barkoff is going to come in today, right? And yet, at the time, I loved Matt Barkoff. Sometimes Matt Barkoff came in a bad mood. Sometimes Matt Barkoff came in so happy. And the thing that determined that is what was going on in business. And the things I remember about our relationship working together was I used to make light of things, not knowing the situation you were in, right?
sure,
I remember going to you and telling you, stop. It's this is this
I
is
remember that
that's
conversation.
not important. Like,
Yeah.
you have no control of that, or
Yep. Yep.
and it was almost like, before a big meeting, I remember you used to get very nervous, right? And think about what could go wrong, or who's going to be with you, and I hope they're performing well. And in some of the most tense moments that you had, I remember, and I do this a lot, telling you a joke that is totally not, that totally not expected, right?
Yeah.
And some people might look at that and say, "What are you doing?" Right? But I'll say a joke just to get your mind off things, so you could like focus
Yeah.
on really being successful, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta cut it. Like, you have to, you really have to like laugh at yourself in a way, right? You can't take things so
Yeah.
seriously in life. I'm
You're
sorry.
you're you're no, you're 100% right, and I think that's kind of my transformation that's really happened. Just the reality of like I am who I am, um, but I think for me it's shedding the layers of my ego and just getting down to like who is my true sense of self that I'm gonna bring to whatever I'm doing each and every day, and I know that if I bring my true sense of self and I do that and I normalize everything, then everything else will take care of itself. The byproduct will be, good work. The byproduct will be being a great friend that can listen. The byproduct will be being a good husband and father. And as I've seen my kids grow over the year, and as I've been, working this program, since 2021, and of course I've had relapses and everything else. But what I've seen is I've seen myself change. I've also seen generational change in my kids in terms of how they are. And then in business, the way I'm showing up for things is just fundamentally different. How people, work with me and react to me are just very, very different. So it's been a real eye opener. I do think a lot about our days and our times together where, there was this roller coaster Matt that was coming all the time. Probably go this way, but it was like, sometimes it was super high, sometimes it was super low. And it was my character defects and my ego that was causing those things. And then the natural reaction to that was medicating with drugs and alcohol. And that obviously is a lethal combination.
That's right. But your success is you being, a dad, a husband, but is also recognizing that you had a problem, right? And nobody could tell you really what to do in life. You have to want it, right? And there must have been a point in your time where you wanted it, right? And you knew you needed help, and you got it. Whether it was your wife telling you, whether it was your wife being disappointed with you, whether you being disappointed in yourself, or something that had happened, but you're on your way, and that's something to be really proud about, because unfortunately a lot of people don't recognize some of their addictions, right? Some of their problems, and it's not just addictions, right? It's their relationships, it's their mental health, it's they don't recognize how they treat people, or so it's all very similar in a way. So sometimes it takes a little honesty from other people, or sometimes it takes as a person recognizing,
Yeah,
some.
self-awareness is a really important skill that I think not all of us work on, or are at least paying attention to that. Especially, in fast-paced technology companies, startups, like business, right? Just being able to come in and read the room and understand that you're not the only person there, and the world doesn't evolve around you. And as we know, in this world of tech, there's huge egos, right? There's lots of money. There's status. There's, all these things that, a lot of folks are paying attention to. I just don't care about it anymore. And what it's allowed me to do is just show up as just that individual who, is a part of the ride, is on the bus, as they say, has an oar, is, pulling the boat down the river with a bunch of other people. And I think that's what makes relationships and everything else kind of go forward.
Yeah, and putting like the career hat on, as some people that report to me, and being a boss, it's really important to recognize when people on your team are hurting in one respect or another. Now, this doesn't mean addiction, right? This doesn't mean just addiction. This could be a personal problem, a family, mental problem. And I really noticed a lot of this happening during COVID.
Yeah.
With some of with people on my team, where one of them was a single person, was having a very tough time, not able to go out, not be able to socialize, not doing well, it was affecting them at the job. But it was really up to me to just talk to them, outside of business. I always started the one-on-ones and always say, how are you? How was your night? What'd you do? I really try to take the tone outside of business at first, then we get into business. Because one of the things I thoroughly believe in, and there's a number of people that worked with me, I worked with, that I pick up the phone and just to say hello. This could be years later, and just to say hello and catch up. And a lot of people aren't like that. Sometimes I'll say to them, hey, why is it I have to pick up the phone to say hello and see how you're doing? Don't be a stranger.
Well, you've always been very good at that. It's interesting that you're bringing, and I'm glad you're going in this direction, because I want to talk about, like, how have you helped others that have worked with you and for you. I've seen stats as high as 25 to 35% of mental health issues during COVID, and for a lot of folks, I'm sure that's still something that is prevalent. And a natural course to that also is addiction and recovery. I mean, I was that during 2020. I was drinking probably close to 3/4 of a bottle of vodka every single day while I was working. And nobody knew it because, of course, we don't have smell vision on conference calls, but that was impacting my work. I was waking up, every morning thinking, when can I have my first drink? And that actually towards the end of 2020 is when I finally said, I really need to start, working on this. So, what do you do when you see somebody that's visibly having struggles? How do you handle that? How do you manage through that? And when somebody comes to you, because I think a lot of folks that are going to see this either are, maybe in that situation and are looking for help and guidance. What do you do? What do you do when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Dave, I need help. Like, I'm an addict, or I'm having some mental issues. I just lost a parent. Like, I don't know what to do. I lost a child." How do you
Yeah.
work? How do you do that? What do you do?
I put my human hat on, right? And not so much boss hat. One of the things that I'm proud about is that it's you first as a human. And there's been a number of times where I've had people who worked for me that had issues, whether it was health issues, whether it was personal issues, family issues, financial issues, you name it. But the thing is, I've said a number of times to people, take time if you need it. You know, if you're not feeling well, go to a doctor. How could I help you is giving you the space that you need to get better. Now, I'm not going to say take the next month off, right? But if someone's going to call me and say they're having an issue, they want to see somebody, and if they trust me enough to get that personal, I'm never going to question them. In fact, I will never even speak about it again unless they want to speak about it with me. I'm not going to infringe in someone's personal life at all, ever. If they bring it up to me once, I might ask them, "Hey, how's your wife? How's this?" But I'm not gonna talk about it a lot unless they want to talk about it.
Do you think, and this is probably a question that you may not be able to answer, but I'm putting it out there. Do you feel that in 2025 companies are doing enough to help employees that are struggling with mental health, with addiction? Do you think that companies are providing the right programs and, frankly, the right training to leaders that can that are faced with these challenges? Where somebody would come to me and say, "Hey, Matt, I need help," or "Hey, Dave, I need help." Like, do you feel like companies are doing something about this, or do you think that companies need to work on this as a core part of their HR strategies?
I don't know the answer to that. My gut is the bigger companies are addressing this with their employees. I don't know if they're executing or they have a real plan of people that could handle this. But I don't have an answer for that at all. I don't know. Listen. I'm gonna put it back on you. What do you think?
So, I mean, at Salesforce, there were a couple of leaders that back in 2020 started a channel inside of Slack called Soberforce, and I've talked about this in previous episodes. In fact, I had Mara Nelson on episode 3. She's the CEO of Sobrinth, and what Sobrinth provides is basically technology. They're about to come out with a product called, I believe it's SoberPath is, I think, the name, but they provide full addiction sobriety services to companies, your Salesforce, your you're some big company, Amazon, and these guys go into these organizations and work with HR organizations to set up formal processes, trainings, content. They have an outsourced phone line that employees can confidentially call into and say, hey, I need help. And so I think it's, to answer your question, I think it's happening with companies like the Sobrance of the world. I do feel like HR is still struggling to find a balance, because when you're talking about something like addiction and addiction in the workplace, there's all sorts of privacy laws, HIPAA. There's all sorts of like layers to this. I'm going to be having on a future episode, I've got an HR leader that has run a couple of Fortune 1,000 companies, and I'm looking forward to having them on to talk about this very topic. So I don't necessarily have the answer myself. Being a person that has gone through it, where I've actually gone to my leader, I've had leaders that have been very supportive and said, I'm here for you. Take the time you need. I've also had leaders that have regressed, unfortunately, and have not been supportive and have not been the type of resource. And I think if that type of thing happens, that just causes an individual to get further reclusive and kind of go inside themselves, which could lead to further harm down the road. So I'd like to see more of this come out. I'd like to hear more HR leaders talk about it.
Yeah, it brings me to a time where there's been a small handful of times where there's been an offsite, a company offsite, a SCO or a sales kickoff, or
Yep.
where there's been situations where after a female came up to me and said, told me a situation that occurred with someone else that was they felt was being very abusive to them. They were
And I'm
drinking,
guessing probably alcohol was involved.
and they were drinking, and they were abusive, and they got a little comfortable. They didn't remember where they were.
Yeah,
And something like that, we acted on immediately.
of
We
course.
did.
You have to.
I mean, there is nothing more than one should do than to protect your own employees. And we made changes right away after looking into it. Quickly. And that's important, that everybody in an organization feels protected, whether it's in a business meeting, at a
Yeah,
business
and
trip,
and, and
or
safe and
and
safe.
safe
Yeah.
and safe. And listen, we get it with some of these SCOs. People will drink. Personally, my rule, and listen, I'm not a drinker. I some of my friends make fun of me that when we go out, I order iced tea. And
Yeah, I don't think
you
I think I've seen you drink maybe once in all
you
of our
you,
time
you
together.
won't. Every so often, maybe I'll have a bourbon. Every so often, and
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
could probably count on one hand in the last 12 months when I had it, and that's just because it's not like I choose. I just don't want it. But a rule I've always had in my career is, when you're at a business function or a business trip, don't I'm not drinking. I don't. I'm not drinking. Occasionally, a glass of wine, if everybody's having it, just to put down on the table. But
Yeah.
I just don't. And there's no wrong or right. But it is wrong if you start drinking too much in
I
a
think
business setting.
I think the irony of what you just said is that it is such an accepted part of business, meaning
Sure.
the drinking aspect. And it's funny because, like, when you are working in whatever role you're in, the expectation is you're a good teammate, that you show up for your customers, that you prepare, right, that you present well. Like, all those things are like critical. And then, like, an hour after the meeting, everybody goes out to dinner and there's like 4 bottles of wine, and it's like everything goes out the door and people like become a different version of themselves, whether it's just because they are drinking or what have you. And just the irony of it is, it's not a mix that
Yeah.
I'm frankly a fan of. And over the years, I've seen folks, in sales kickoffs, where they are acting, borderline, abusive towards another or aggressive towards another, and I've literally had to pull them aside and say, "Hey, listen,
That's not cool. And I remember times where you would say that, that's not cool, especially with the new people that come on board that are
well,"
not.
and it's like, listen, like if you want to drink like that, then go somewhere else, but like you need like just be really careful. You're not the only person here, so just maybe just chill out a little bit. Maybe go have
Right.
a soda and just and I think when there's kind of two types of reactions. One is like, "Holy shit, I didn't realize that." Like, "Thank you," or the others are like, "Yeah, fuck off." And then I'm like, "Okay, that's fine. You can go and do what you. But if you're gonna need it, just realize that your actions are going to have consequences potentially."
Yeah. The thing is, this gets back to the career. If you're fortunate enough as a person to work with people that you respect, that you trust,
Yeah.
you're gonna go far. And this is where relationships come in. How many times have we spoken, and we spoke with other people we trusted and worked together, and says, "Hey, love to get the band back together one day. Love
Yeah.
to work
Yeah.
together." Right? There's a trust there, and I've been fortunate in my career to trust the people I work with and work for. But to me, that's really important. Is that trust and knowing people that you're working with, because you get them, what's expected of them and of you. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well
you
said.
know, it's to me that's incredibly important in this day and age. But yeah,
And I think, Dave, to that point, knowing what you're and I think it's hard too when you're maybe going to a new company trying to figure out like, how do I fit in this team. And I think what and folks in the program ask me like, "Hey, I'm going to a new company. I'm a little worried, that I'm going to be judged, or they don't know who I am and stuff." And like what do I do? My guidance to them is like very simple. You know, just be the person who you are. Be transparent about who you are. If you want to share with them that you're, in recovery, and then do it. If you don't. But you know, people will see you for who you are if you just show up as the most sincere, true version of yourself, and everything else will take care of itself. If you come in, wearing a mask, and you come in, trying to, put on some type of like acting job, that eventually is gonna, come to a point where the camera's turned off and people are gonna be like, "Who the fuck is that?" Right? Like, and that's not a healthy way to do
I
it.
couldn't agree more. It's be yourself. What you see as we work together is the same as what my friends see. Someone that's transparent, someone that's positive, someone that likes to laugh, someone that you know is not afraid of who I am, right? And it's funny. I'm going to say this again. When the interesting thing at Buddy Media, I'm going to go back to Buddy Media because I was this 40-something-year-old working with a bunch of 21 and 22-year-olds, right? And they looked at me like I was like, this person that had a career that has knowledge. But all I wanted to do was fit in with them, right? All I want, and I made some great friends.
Of course you did,
In
yeah.
there that came with me at other jobs that have really excelled, doing anything like Michael Palladini, right? The Bourbon King, who I became very close friends, who's a good 15 years younger than me. But the thing that always stuck out was when we closed when we closed the sales force, everybody was excited, and I was so excited for everybody. You know, they had their win. We did it together. It wasn't easy, but the amount of people that came up to me that thanked me for leading them and helping them with stories, like the little things, the little stories, and I took a step back because it was nothing about me, because I was thanking them about bringing me into their lives, but teaching me on how to be better in this world that I'm working with younger people in a social media world. What do I know? But and that's where I don't ever believe in perfection. There's no such thing as perfection,
Yeah.
right? It's being curious and learning as you go. And really understanding the people you work with, of course, and the product that you're selling and your customers. But here it's about people, and the progress that you can make with doing that. And throughout my career, as I was maturing in my career, you're working with younger people, and they have so much to offer. They're so smart. They think in different ways, but the ones that are curious, are going to talk to you and ask you questions. And again, for me, it's about progress and never being perfect. Because if anybody's
Progress, not perfection. It's something that happens in
if someone
AA.
tells you that everything's perfect, I'll say, well, come on, you're lying. Nothing.
I
Perfect.
call what you just described so elegantly. I call it the pay it forward effect, where you've done something in the past that you thought had really not a lot of importance or relevance, but to that person, they remembered. They
That's right.
remembered what you did. And like, I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn just that I haven't heard from in like decades, and just say, "Hey, I remember this time where you did this and this, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you." Or, it's really amazing the profound effect that you realize that you have on others if you just simplify the way that you behave and how you act in situations. I was with my son over the weekend. I took him out to dinner after a baseball game, U of O baseball game, and the things that he's saying and he's doing at 19 are like the levels of maturity that he has is just absolutely insane. And I'm not saying this because it's my son. Obviously, I'm proud of him, and he's worked really hard to get how he is. But how he is showing up in terms of like his goals and his aspirations in life. And I talk to, like, a lot of dads reach out to me that they know that I have a son that's a very successful baseball player, and they reach out to me. They say, like, "What did you do?" And I'm like, it wasn't what I did. I kind of like describe my life as like, when kids are younger, you're like the producer. And as your kids get older, you become the consultant, right? For Jonah, it wasn't necessarily about his ability to throw a baseball. That's 5% of the job. The other 95%, which frankly is in business, is about your ability to show up, your ability to prepare, hard work, being a great teammate, being honest, being supportive. It's not about you.
Yeah.
Like those things are what, if I deem what success is for me, that is what is success.
No, and it's testament to you, all right, and your wife, by bringing him to the baseball field, and seeing a talent and being a part of a team and going through, elementary and middle school and high school, but here's the other side to that, Matt, right? You're fortunate that you have, Jonah, excelled but really enjoyed being a teammate, right? And he was good at it, right? And he worked really hard to progress, to better. But most kids and most children aren't, meaning that they're stuck on using technology. They're stuck with their phones using TikTok and Snapchat and everything that you could think of, where you ask yourself, well, you kind of assume that this is not good, right? From a social aspect. right? And you try to you try to be a parent with saying, hey, drop your phone, pick up the phone, call up a friend. You don't need to start using technology and being someone that you're not, because unfortunately in this day and age, if you go into like TikTok, people are trying to portray themselves as they're not.
Oh,
and
yes,
and
yes.
it makes me really sad, because I would one day we're going to see data of people that were athletes that after school they were part of a group or a team. Doesn't have to be athletes, just part of a group. Drop your phones and work to some kind of goal. And then there's other ones that aren't, that are stuck on their devices. Like, how do they work in an environment, a professional environment,
Yeah.
when everything is you can't build relationships that way. I'm fortunate with my kids; they have great friends, but I'm not gonna lie. I think they use technology way too much, and I think it just poisons their minds. And I think that's a big problem in this world today.
I agree. I agree 100%, and that's well said. We're getting close to time, and let me just click on something real quick. Okay, there you are. Uh, Dave, I love you, brother. I think you're
I
just
love you.
I think you're just an amazing human being. Thank you for being a part of this. What's your next venture? Like, what are you
I,
doing? Or like, have you
I
figured that out? Or are you just kind of
I'm
like,
I'm 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 close to figuring out, and I'm hoping it's going to be with getting back together with people that I love,
that's
and people
amazing,
that I trust, and people I believe in and believe in me, and that's 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 part of the recipe to success.
100%.
So I've been patient, and I'm enjoying life right now, and working for some people on the side, and there's no such thing as quit in me. I might be 55 years old. My wife says I act like a 25-year-old. And I have more motivation now than I think I had 20 years ago in my career.
I was listening to a podcast last night, and one of the guests was talking about how her 50s are, kind of the favorite decade that she's in, and I'm 51, and I just started this podcast, and I'm doing things around my wellness, and that's taking the front row seat to my life. And so I'm really looking forward to how the next decade is for
Yeah,
me. And
and
so
it's gonna
it's just been amazing to see you and be a part of your life, and having you here just means a lot to me personally. But I think you're going to help a lot of folks, and
Yeah, well,
thank you.
you're gonna help a lot more, and one thing I want to say personally, I'm proud of you. Like, listen, you've been through the darkest of dark that many people don't understand, never would understood, might judge because of it, right? And that's okay, right? Because you knew that you had a problem, and you're not out of it, but you recognize it, and you're doing the things that you have to do to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yes.
And that has to do with a lot of the people around your circle, right? There's been a lot of times that you just called me up and said hello, but asked me questions, right? You are always incredibly honest. When you ask questions, when you have something on your mind, at least with me. And it's a testament to you that you could recognize this. Your family could recognize this, right? That you were going through some tough times, and you're overcoming it, right? And part of life lessons is obviously making the best person for yourself. We're not perfect, but also showing the people that are around us that resiliency and keeping focused. You could get to your goals. You could do whatever you want to do, and never quit on it. And I don't care if you're a drug addict, you have you're a gambling problem, your drinking problem. Everybody has a vice of some sort, right? Some worse than others. But the biggest success that I could say for you is recognizing it and getting the support that you had to start to overcome it, right? My uncle was an alcoholic. He passed away. He lived long. He lived to 91, but he passed away a couple of years ago.
Mm.
And I remember one of the things he told me. When he was in his 80s, he was still going to the meetings.
Yep.
I said, Uncle
That'll be
Mark,
me.
why are you still going to these meetings? He goes, because I'm an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, when was the last time you had a drink? 20 years ago.
Yep.
And he said, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. And the littlest things, I don't care. You could slip up. I don't care if it was 10, 20, 30 years.
Yes.
And it just, I was very close to him. And it just made me understand the progress that he's made, but also him recognizing that at any given time he could fall off. And he will not let that happen again.
I say this often, and that is, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I do know that today I'm not going to drink. And because, again, like looking forward and like it's good to look forward towards things, but you cannot plan for the future. You can only have a toolbox that you can dip into when you are facing challenges and adversity, right, and struggles. And so that's just well said. Dave, thank you so much. I love you. Like I said, you're
Love you,
my
buddy.
brother, and just I think this is going to be massively helpful for a lot of folks.
Keep rocking. Keep rocking.
Thanks, buddy.
Do what you do. All right, buddy.
Thanks everybody for joining the Sober Cold Bear. We're going to go ahead and sign off, but remember, there's a lot of things out there for you. If you need help, ask for help. Reach out to me. Reach out to your best friend, your loved one, whatever. We're here to help you. You can't do this alone, and this is a very, very lonely disease. And by the way, this is necessarily have to do with addiction specifically, mental health, struggles, challenges. The great thing about having love in your life is that you can reach out to those who love you that can actually maybe guide you and point you in the right direction. So thanks again, Dave.
Yeah,
and we're going to go ahead and sign off.
And remember, invite laughter into your world. A good belly laugh every day is great. Don't take everything so seriously, and don't sweat the small shit, and have fun.
Mike.
Thanks, Matt. Love you, buddy.
All right. Love you too. Talk soon. Bye.
Sometimes I feel like I want to fly without no wings. I elevate inside my mind.